to our Norse Mythology as it pertains to the MCU panel. This is the part where I talk really fast. So just so everybody knows, we will be recording this panel and putting it on YouTube. And so if you're like, I want to record this for posterity, it will be on YouTube. Please no flash photography, that will distract us because we do actually have bird brains. We would like to have the disclaimer that this is all in good fun and we are not professionals in either Norse mythology or comics or the MCU. This is all in good fun, this is just our opinions, and it is made with the respect that they made movies we did not. If you are wondering the correct pronunciation for things, so are we. We might be pronouncing some names like differently. Is it Fenris or Fenrir? Sources say we don't know. We're not professionals. So if you do actually know the correct pronunciations, please tell us. And also just the last thing, in the event of emergency, please find the nearest exit and calmly go that way. Unless, of course, the emergency is Ragnarok, in which case running around screaming is encouraged. So, let's start. My name is Stella, my pronouns are she, her, and the way I first got into Norse mythology was actually when I was 13. I watched the first Thor movie, and I was like, I want to learn more about the source. And this is my wonderful friend who asked me to do the panel with me.
Hi, I'm Cal. Pronouns they, them, and I first got into Norse mythology when I read a book called Runemarks, which is amazing, and you all should read it if you like Norse mythology.
So let's just go with some basic introductions of what the heck are these. So first we have Yggdrasil, the world tree. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is like an actual tree that connects the 9 realms. And while we do love the cosmic sci-fi tree, we do think that we are going to deduct a few points because the cosmic sci-fi tree in the MCU does not have the gossiping squirrel running up and down it.
So there's 2 types of gods. One of them is the Aesir, and they're the main gods who live in Asgard, and most of the gods inside of Asgard are Aesir. There are also the Vanir, and those gods are mainly from Vanaheim, and there used to be, there was a war between both gods, and that's how the gods, when they made a peace treaty, some of the gods moved to Asgard.
So we are not going to be covering all of the Norse gods because that would take forever and we only have an hour, and most of the Norse gods actually don't show up in the MCU. So first off we have everybody's favorite horrible father, Odin. It is a meme at this point that he is a horrible father in the MCU. He is the template, and so, like, I mean, he was also so weak that he couldn't even handle one emotionally charged conversation with his son, and after 5 minutes he went into Odin's sleep to avoid it. Somehow, he is a worse person than in Norse mythology, which the bar is very low for that. So he is a space conquistador, a horrible father. For example, he locked his daughter up for thousands of years. He pitted his sons against each other for thousands of years on purpose. And so we do have confirmation that Thor is his father, and while his mother, Bestla, and his brothers, Vili and Ve, are not mentioned, since we have Thor, we do assume that Vili, Ve, and Bestla are there. We also do want to give him half of a point for having a long ship bed, which is space version of a race car bed, and we are looking forward to IKEA's production of those.
And then we have the Norse mythology Odin, and this picture is actually from a manuscript in from 1766. So he is the Allfather and the leader of the Aesir. He has 3 children, and their names are Thor, Baldr, and Hodor. When he's on his throne, he can see everything within the 9 realms, and then he has his ravens, Hugin and Munyin. who will fly out amongst the 9 realms, listening to everything that everyone's saying, and then at night will fly back and tell him everything that everyone's saying, and that's why he knows everything. He also has his wolves, Gary and Becky, which don't get mentioned enough. And he himself doesn't need to eat any food, so he generally gives all of his food to the wolves. He does still drink meat, though, and that does come up in a lot of his myths. He gave up one eye so he could drink from the well of wisdom. Basically, he wanted all the knowledge in the world, which it was kept in the well of wisdom, and the person guarding it, Mimir, was like, I gotta get something for this exchange, and you can see everything, so I want one of the eyes so I can also see everything. And so he gave up his eye, and it is at the bottom of the well of wisdom now. He is a bit of a Don Juan and willing to do whatever it takes to gain more knowledge, including sacrificing himself to get runes, but we will come back to that later.
So we have MCU Thor, everybody's favorite himbo icon turned into Golden Retriever Man. Moving on.
We have Norse Mythology Thor. He is Odin's son. He's married to Sif. He is very strong and very quick to anger. Not the brightest. And he did actually have goats pull his carriage, so that part of the movie was accurate. But if you think like riding around on a carriage with goats is a little weird, Frey, one of the other gods we'll talk about later, Frey would ride a giant golden boar, so it's not the weirdest. There's also a wonderful myth about this Thor that we wish the MCU will have, will include some time where his hammer got stolen by a Jotun, and it was ransomed. The ransom for that was marriage to Freya, the most beautiful woman in all of Asgard. And she, of course, was like, this isn't going to happen. So Loki was like, just put on a wedding dress and the thickest veil you can and marry him yourself. And so he did. And then on his wedding night, he got his hammer back and murdered his husband because he's Thor, and that's the type of thing Thor does.
Also, Thor was the protector of Midgard, and so he would go out, he wouldn't just go out to like kill giants and stuff, he would also protect people when they went out Viking, and we just thought that this was a cool fact. Viking is a verb. Norse were only Vikings when they went out Viking. So now it's MCU Loki. Unfortunately, we do not have Tom Hiddleston in costume to come out and surprise everyone, but if you know how to get that, please tell us after the panel. So he is the son of the ice giant Laufey, and in the Norse mythology, Laufey is actually his mom and not his dad, like in the movie. And honestly, I personally think that is making bad moms underrepresented in Marvel. I think Marvel needs to up their bad mom game. He was adopted by Odin as a baby and then pitted against his brother Thor for years. He is 100% sass, extra 20% daddy issues, and 200% our favorite redeemed villain.
And then we have Norse Mythology Loki. They are pretty non-binary as far as mythology goes. About half of the myths that they're in, as when they're disguised as a random human, it's like half and half whether they're a man or a woman. And then he also is able to have, like, he had one of his kids as the mother of the child, and then the other ones, they were the father of the child. So, I mean, they're magic, so they can have a uterus or not if they want. are Odin's sworn blood brother, which makes them half Azar, which is, so it was a real weird shock watching it, and it's just like, all of a sudden, we have Odin's son, and I was like, excuse me, what? He is a Jotun, but he is associated with fire and not ice. Also, Jotun, I don't think we said, it's just the name for a giant. And so there's ice Jotuns and fire Jotuns and rock Jotuns and all sorts of Jotuns. And the MCU is just like icy planet filled with, ice giants. He is very quick thinking and smooth talking, just like in the MCU, and that does keep him alive, but it also got him into some tricky places where he got his mouth sewn shut. He's got a very mischievous nature, which has made him an outsider among the Azar. And his name could mean not, but also it could be translated as Loki, which could mean fire, and that's why there's a lot of really interesting fiction based off of Norse mythology where Loki was originally just a sentient patch of fire, and then with magic was like, I'll give myself a mortal form. So it's really interesting stuff with them.
Okay, so let me set the scene, all right? You are 13 years old. You have just watched the first Thor movie. Avengers has already come out, and so you don't really have any questions on, like, what happens next? Where are these people going? What the heck is Loki doing? You kind of know what comes next. Your biggest question is, so why does Odin's horse have 8 legs? And you go on Google, and it said, well, Loki, in the form of a mare, distracted a builder's horse, and then later he gave birth to an 8-legged horse, and you go, I want to learn more. That is my experience with Norse mythology. So we have Sleipnir. He is Loki's son. Loki was Sleipnir's mother, and the stallion Svadilfari was his father. So he is an 8-legged horse. Odin rides him into battle. So yes, Odin is riding his nephew, and I don't care what Thor Ragnarok retconned. I still believe that Loki is Sleipnir's mother in the MCU because I just want it to be. And then we have his children with Angrboda. Angrboda is a Jotun who has a lot of magic. The first one we will talk about is Hel, and no, her name is not Hela, it is Hel. She is half living and half dead, and she is the ruler of Helheim, which is where people go when they die, and we will talk about this more later. She also has a dog, Gamar, which I thought was maybe who was in the Ragnarok movie who she was riding, but no, that turned out it was Fenris, which is her brother, so that was again a little weird. We have Jormungandr, the world serpent, big snake, who was a big snake when they found him, and so they threw him into the ocean, and he got even bigger, so big in fact he can wrap around the world and bite his own tail. He is in the ocean until Ragnarok comes, and in which case he will come out and his breath will poison the sky, and he and Thor will fight a mighty battle before he gets killed and Thor will succumb to the poison breath and take 9 steps and die.
Yeah, and he's also the reason earthquakes happen, because sometimes he just gets a little hungry and he nibbles on the roots of Yggdrasil, and it makes the whole tree shake.
And the last child with Angrboda is Fenris.
Yes, Fenris is a wolf. He has been chained to an island because there was a prophecy saying that Fenris will grow up and be very angry with all of the Azar and become their downfall. And so they're like, you know what we should do? We should chain him to a rock for thousands of years. And then, and they tricked him to do that because he's not stupid. They're just like, you're so strong. I want to see if you can break out of these things. And so they started with non-magical items and he was able to break out. And then they went to the magical one and he was like, I'll only let you put this on me if you promise that one of you puts your hand in my mouth. And then Tyr was like, okay, sure, we can do that. And then, of course, they didn't let him out afterwards, so he bit off Tyr's hand and ate it. And then everybody was mad about that except for Tyr. Tyr was like, I mean, that is the deal that I made. But yeah, anyways, if you want somebody not to grow up hating you, I say don't chain them to a rock when they're a child.
And lastly, we have the twins. The twins were his children with his wife Sigyn, who is one of the Aesir. You have Narfi and Vali. They don't really do a lot. They're kind of just there to die, unfortunately. As punishment for some of Loki's actions, they die, and he is chained to a rock with their intestines until Ragnarok. So circling back to Hel,
she is the queen of Helheim, and that's where most people go when they die. And she's actually a pretty chill person, considering she was thrown into Helheim. Well, it wasn't Helheim. She was thrown into Niflheim, and it became Helheim when she got there, because that literally means where Hel lives. And yeah, she just kind of has a castle. And in her castle, the beds are called the sick beds, and then the knives are famine, and the cups are drought and all that stuff.
Every goth kid's dream.
Yeah, because she was like 13. She saw what happened to her brothers and was like, fine, I'll just go there where absolutely no one is.
At least I'm a princess, I guess.
She is fully a Jotun. Most of what I was reading had her as a full Jotun, even though her father is half Azar. Her mother is a Jotun. And yeah, one half of her body is strikingly beautiful, and then the other half is a rotting corpse. And we kind of wish that was included in MCU, just kind of like, because that would have been such a cool reveal. It's just like she's like putting all of her magical power into an attack, so she drops the glamour and then it's just like half of a skeleton. That would have been a cool shot, and they really missed out.
Or even if it's like at the end where Thor's like doing Immigrant Song, like lightning bolts, and he does it and she gets like half fried, like that would have been, like, we know that Kate Blanchett is very beautiful and it might cause some people distress to see her half rotted, but like the MCU has the budget that they could do like the makeup or the special effects for it, and it would have been cool. Her name is Hela in the MCU, as in Hela Murdering, which she is. So now we have the background characters who are also gods. So first of all, we have our man Heimdall, who is played by actual god on Earth, Idris Elba. He has 9 biological mothers at the same time. Don't think about it too hard. He also has very good vision. He is the watchman of Asgard, and when the time comes, he will see the invading army before Ragnarok, and he will sound the horn to let everybody know, hey, Ragnarok's here. Also, if you think that we're spending a lot of time foreshadowing Ragnarok, welcome to 60% of Norse myths.
And then we have Sif. She's a member of the Azar as well. She is Thor's wife, and she has golden hair. Her hair represents wheat and the crop, and and life and fertility in that way. But the golden hair is more interesting in that that is what ended up getting Loki's mouth sewn shut for, and we will talk about that more later.
And then we have everybody's favorite mom, Frigga, or Frigg. In mythology, most of the time she is referred to as Frigg. She is the All-Mother in the MCU. She is one of Odin's really best redeeming qualities because they have very cute moments. She is Odin's wife, and a lot of times in myths, she is like advice, and she's just kind of there. She's the mom. But her biggest claim to fame is that there is a prophecy that her son Balder will get killed, and she cannot couldn't stand the thought of that, of having her son die. So she goes everywhere and she makes every single thing, like even the rocks, promise that they will never touch her son. And she happens to overlook mistletoe. And guess who finds out about that? Loki does.
Yeah. And yeah, that's how Balder died. He actually set up Balder's brother Hodor, who's blind. He gave him a mistletoe dart and is like, oh, nothing can hurt your brother. And it's funny, and all the other gods are throwing random stuff at him, and it's just bouncing off. So Loki gives Hodor the mistletoe dart and is like, throw it at your brother. And then that kills Balder, and then Hodor ends up getting executed for killing Baldar. And that's one of the things that makes Ragnarok happen.
So now we have the Marvel background characters, and so the Warriors 3 actually are not there, but watching the Thor movies, we were like, oh, well, there could be people that the Warriors 3 represent. We know that they are in the comics, but this is focused on Norse myths.
First we have Fandral, who is the blonde one, and he looks like he could be a possible Balder, because he's just kind of like pretty and happy, and that's his only character trait.
Then we have Yosef. We think he is possibly Frey because he is an excellent warrior, which is something that Frey was known for, and he is from Vanaheim. Frey is one of the Vanir that that lived down on Asgard with his sister Freya and their father Njord.
And then we have Hogun, and he is mythologically accurate Thor, basically. Like we were looking at how he looks and how he acts, and we're just like, how did Thor end up in a Thor movie?
Thor 2.
How is there real Thor in a Marvel Thor movie?
Yeah, so the first 3 Thor movies are just Thor, Too Furious. And so now we have the Valkyries. In the MCU, the Valkyries kind of are like there for a flashback, and it's sad, but the Valkyries are really cool. They were women who were chosen by Odin to fly over the battlefield, and they would choose which soldiers would die, and then they would pick the best warriors from those fallen soldiers. So they're like very thorough vetting process. And afterwards, they would take them to either Valhalla or Folkvanger, which is another hall adjacent to Valhalla. That is also Freya's hall, because Freya was not just the goddess of beauty, she was also the goddess of war. And so Freya did have first pick out of them, but yeah, the Valkyries would escort the souls of the dead soldiers off the battlefield. And this is just a fun fact. If anybody is familiar with the 2014 film What We Do in the Shadows, the man who plays Stu did the lighting design for the Valkyrie flashback in Thor Ragnarok.
Okay, and now we have some of the mythological locations. First, we have Valhalla and Folkvanger, and the warriors who died in battle would either go to Valhalla or Folkvanger, as we just said. Freya and Odin, Freya would pick, and then Odin would get the leftovers. They were places for the dead to train for Ragnarok. Like, it wasn't Viking heaven, it was just a place where they would continually train so that when Ragnarok happened and they needed an army, they had an army. Which is what made Love and Thunder so frustrating to me, because they were like, oh, everyone we know is in Valhalla. Darn, we really need an army. I'm going to talk about Valhalla again, but also we're going around trying to find an army, and they spent like a third of the plot trying to find an army while simultaneously talking about Valhalla, and it felt like Dora the Explorer, and it's just like, you know, it's like, where is my map? And it's like, it's in your backpack. Just take it off and look at it. Why are you doing this? And it's just like, if only everyone wasn't in Valhalla and we could use them for our army. And it's like, but Valhalla is for your army.
And then, like, at the end, they're just like, Valhalla looks like the Silver Lands. Yeah, it looks like the Silver Lands and like, Lord of the Rings. I was like, wait, is this Rivendell? Hold on. And, like, I mean, they couldn't even, like, spend the $3 for, like, battle SFX noises just to have in the background. It's like, we're just like, no, where's the battlefield?
Also, Valhalla is supposed to be a big hall where feasting and drinking happens. This is a church on the slide that it could be a representation of what that looked like. And then Folkvanger was a wide open field where, again, they trained for battle. And so it's just like, you know, they keep talking about Valhalla, they come back at the end of the credits, and it's like, look, we're in Valhalla. And I'm like, that is Folkvanger. I'm sorry, you're in the wrong one.
And now we have Asgard. So Asgard was actually partially built by, once the fun stuff for Asgard was built, the Aesir were just like, oh crap. And so then a builder was like, hey, I'll build this for you. All you have to do is give me the sun, the moon, and Freya's hand in marriage. And Loki went, I can fix this. And that's how Sleipnir was born.
Yeah, it was a contract. For a little more context. They were like, you have to do it within a year or it's free. And they're like, he's never going to finish. But then he had a magical horse. And so, like, the day before the contract expired, he was almost done. They only had like a couple stones left for the outer wall. And so everybody's like, we really don't want this to happen. So Loki was like, fine, okay, I'll distract.
Also, the builder is dead now because he got pissed off that they cheated him and tried to fight them, and then Thor was Thor, and he's dead now. So both the Aesir and the Vanir live there. It's kind of like the meeting hall HQ for the gods, because some people like Njord or Frey, they have their own like houses elsewhere, but they like meet up. So think of it as like Asgard is the HQ. And so basically any non-Midgard shenanigans that are not specified to be in Jotunheim are in Asgard. And it does not look like a pipe organ in Norse mythology, but like props to the MCU because that is peak sci-fi design and I love it.
And then there's Jotunheim. As you can see, it's not just icy, and there are more than just frost giants or Jotuns. There are also rock and fire Jotuns, and just really any sort of Jotuns. Oh, I don't know if we mentioned, but the guy who was building Asgard, he was also a Jotun, but he didn't say that at the beginning. And so he just kind of like revealed his Jotun form when he got angry, and then Thor is like, ooh, if you're a Jotun, I can kill you.
And now we have our world, Midgard. Yay! It's where humanity lived and gods visited frequently, and the gods did their shenanigans, and humans were like, okay, this is what's happening now. So I love Thor the Dark World. It's actually my favorite Thor movie. You know, if Thor the Dark World has 10 fans, I am one of them. If the world is against Thor the Dark World, I am against the world. All of that. But the convergence is stupid. Like, it's just repackaged. The sun revolves around the earth. Why does everything revolve around Midgard? Like, why? Like, if anything, like, Yggdrasil is kind of everything. Yggdrasil, like the cosmic Yggdrasil and stuff revolving, that is cool. But why Midgard? Why couldn't it have been like, you know, Asgard? Why couldn't it have been Asgard or Niflheim? Like, or you know, let's give Surt some more attention. Have it like where Surt is. Like, why does it have to be Midgard?
And now we have Helheim and Niflheim. So Helheim is the realm watched over by Hel. That's where most people go after death if you didn't die in battle. There's a castle where some people go, and as I said before, the cups are called thirst, the table is called hunger, and the knives are called famine. And then Niflheim is the realm in which Helheim is located, and then evil or bad people are sent to have been stuck there out in the freezing cold for eternity. And while Helheim isn't the best, it is better than being in a freezing cold, empty realm with a whole bunch of other evil people.
Let's touch on some weapons, shall we? Mjolnir! Or, Mew Mew, as is the correct pronunciation. So, after Loki shaved off Sif's hair, Thor said, hey, fix this or else. And so Loki went to the brothers Brock and Sindri, and he went, hey, the Sons of Ivaldi are like saying they're better than you, and they're like, but we can outforce them. And he goes, okay, make some presents for the Asgardians. Then he goes to the Sons of Ivaldi and goes, hey, these guys are like saying they're better than you. Forge presents for Asgard. There's no ulterior motives here. And the Sons of Ivaldi went, okay, but if we lose, we get your head. And Loki goes, you're not gonna lose. But the Sons, oh yeah,
if they win, if they had the better gifts, then they would get Loki's head because Loki was slandering them.
Yeah, and so then, they make Sif's hair, and everybody goes, yay, Sif has hair again. And then the other people make Mjolnir, and they go, weapons are a lot more useful than hair. And Loki is about to get his head cut off when he goes, wait. Head, not neck. But you can't cut a guy's head off without touching his neck, right? They're like, well, what are we gonna do? So in order to get Loki to stop talking for once, they sewed his mouth shut for a while.
Yeah, and that way he couldn't talk his way out of any other situations with his mischievous nature.
So some other features of Mjolnir is it can shoot lightning, both to fry people and revive them. So the scene in Endgame where he does, the defibrillator thing on Tony is actually kind of accurate, although please do not harness the power of lightning to restart someone's heart. Just follow the first aid regulations for defibrillators. And another cool thing is it can be shrunken down into pocket size and fit down somebody's shirt for all of your sneaky needs.
Yes. Oh, and the mythology thing, or the MCU thing, where it's only those worthy of Thor's power, that's not a thing.
It's, if you can hold it.
It's heavy. It's really heavy, and Thor was really strong and really muscular, and so that's how the Jotun stole it too, because the Jotun was also really strong and was able to pick it up and steal it. And then we have some other weapons. Gungnir was made in the same batch or during the same contest as Mjolnir and the hair, as well as Frey's golden boar that we mentioned earlier. That golden boar was made by the dwarves at the same time as that. Whenever it's thrown, it will always hit its target. And then it was kind of interesting in the MCU because it was like one of those laser spears. So I suppose it's just like automatic guiding system for the laser spear instead. And then any oaths sworn on Gungnir are unbreakable, or horrible things will happen to the entire universe.
So don't break any vows sworn on it. So Stormbreaker is not in the MCU only, but we love Stormbreaker, and we think Stormbreaker deserves to be on this list because it is our panel, and we say so, and we love it.
Yeah, and then Surt has a flaming sword that's seen for 5 seconds because Surt's kind of the background character of the movie Ragnarok. But yeah, that's real.
And then we have Freyr's sword, and so Freyr fell in love with a beautiful Jotun woman, and he's like, hey, Skirnir, could you get her to come over and agree to marry me? And Skirnir goes, give me your sword, and Freyr goes, okay, I'm in love enough, this is good. And then in Ragnarok, Frey dies first because he doesn't have a sword, and he fights Surt off with a deer antler. Although, you know what, we are giving him a gold star for effort. He tried, and he could hold his own with a deer antler. So now, quickly, we are going to talk about the runes. What are runes? Runes are the alphabet magic. Each rune represents a letter of the Norse alphabet. but it also has its own words. So you have a room for cattle, you have a room for ice, you have a room for wagon wheel, and also it was believed that they did have magical properties. So you would have...
This computer is 5 years old. It's a good. No, it's 8 years old. We can get through the end of the panel.
Oh, okay. And so you would see like people would like carve rooms for like luck or good health or good travel. How were the rooms discovered? Odin sacrificed himself to himself by hanging himself off of the world tree for 9 days, and then at the end of that, the runes revealed themselves to him. So there are 24 Elder Futhark runes and 16 younger Futhark runes. They're called the Futhark because that is the first few runes. It's a lot like the alphabet is called alphabet because those are the first 2 letters in the Greek alphabet. So I am learning runes because I'm a nerd and runes are cool, and I do not have a lot of good resources, but my favorite resource is the Norse Witch on YouTube, and also give the Norse Witch some love. They do a lot of talking about different myths and different gods, and there is a very long series on the runes, and the most recent rune video is actually how to like write modern words with the runes. And also has good sources, which is good because be careful. Unfortunately, like a lot of things with Norse mythology and Scandinavian things, white supremacists and Nazis have gotten their hands on them. And I did the thing where I was like, oh, let me look up rune meanings, and I go, hey, this website's neat, and they're fancy runes. They have prongs. Don't do the runes with prongs. Because those specifically are ones that white supremacists use. There are certain runes that, depending on how they look, they are dog whistles. So just be careful if there's any source that starts talking about our pure heritage or the fatherland, you should probably delete. You should probably go back and find another place, and this is your daily reminder. Nazis are scum, and we should be uplifting and listening to Jewish voices.
Cool, so next we get to Ragnarok, what we've been foreshadowing all day. So, Ragnarok starts right after the death of Baldur. During Ragnarok, everything bound will become unbound, and that includes Fenrir, who was chained to an island, Jormungandr, who was stuck in the ocean, and then Loki, who had been chained to a rock, with his children's intestines, having snake venom dripped into his faces for decades.
People who have lots of good feelings towards Asgard.
Yes. And during it, a large battle occurs that destroys everything in the 9 realms and kills almost everyone. A few gods survive along with 2 humans. And we personally think that Loki got the easy way out in the movie because, getting impaled sucks, but also at least he wasn't chained to the rock with the entrails of his children having snake venom dripped into his eyeballs for decades.
You win some, you lose some. Yeah. You lose a lot if you're Loki. So in MCU Ragnarok, it's actually kind of like the D plot of the movie, which is very interesting. So, Surtur comes and he destroys all of the land, but Asgard is not just its land, Asgard is its people, and thanks to things that have been happening up until the movie, the people of Asgard were able to escape on a spaceship, and later they make new Asgard. Hela and Fenrir are really the only casualties of Ragnarok, and if you're like, well, a lot of people die in the movie, not in Ragnarok. In actual Ragnarok, at the climax, Hela and Fenrir are the only ones who die. And honestly, I personally do like it for MCU Thor. This is where it's interesting to see the difference between the myth and the movies, because Thor has had all of this character development on what is it to be a leader? Am I a good leader? And he actually comes into himself and grows, and it's this guy's had 3 movies of things sucking for him and being taken away. Give him this one. And also the end, his throne chair looks like the captain's seat in Star Trek, so, we gotta give points for that. So we wanted to give other fictional, adaptations of Norse mythology, and it's time for the Sandman cosplayer to preach to y'all. Norse mythology, it does play a role in Sandman. In Season of Mists, we are introduced to Odin, Loki, and Thor. And they come and stuff happens, and then later in the series, the events in Season of Mist happen where Loki actually becomes a key player in the climax, in events leading up to the climax in the Kindly Ones. And I won't go farther into it because of spoilers, but I will say I am so excited for this subplot in the show.
And then we have Rune Marks. It's a highly fictionalized version of Norse mythology. It's a really fun read. It's by Joanne Harris. It takes place after Ragnarok happened, but this magic is still working its way through the land, and some people who are born with an affinity to magic have rune marks appear on them when they are born, and then it's basically going around using runes for magic purposes and going to the other realms and, working with dwarves and all that fun stuff.
So I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the Mechanisms or with the podcast The Magnus Archives, but a lot of voice actors from the Magnus Archives were actually in a band called The Mechanisms, which was and other non-Magnus Archives people, but they disbanded in 2020, but they basically did space retellings of different folk stuff. So they have, and in a bunch of different genres. So you have like Greek mythology, Arthurian legend, Norse mythology, which is also, so you have the Bifrost incident, which is also slightly based off of Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. It is very much a retelling. Most of the Norse mythology stuff is more like Easter eggs. You go, oh, Ratatosk Express, like the squirrel from the beginning. I would give it a hard R for language, so if you don't like swearing, I'd skip out, but it is a fun album and a very interesting take on Norse mythology.
Okay, and then we have Stargate SG-1, which I think is really a good reference for the MCU, because you do have aliens as the Norse gods, but it turns out that they're just holograms. Like, if you know anything about Stargate, then you'll know that like the Egyptian gods are like sort of like snake symbionts who take over human bodies and use humans as slaves. And so the Asgard is a race of aliens who saw that happening and saved some of the some humans from them and were worshipped, but they interacted them through holograms. In reality, they were like the little Roswell Greys. And I just thought that was like a really interesting like aside, because it's very similar, but yeah. Anyways, it's cool.
And we were going to have a song play, but it's not, but speakers are kind of weird and we don't want to like risk making everybody's ears bleed. But there is a bardcore old Norse style rendition of the Immigrant Song, which is really cool, and we think you guys should listen to it.
Yep. Anyways, we now want to open everything up to questions.
And we are going to be showing our sources. These are our sources, and I personally will be posting pictures of our sources on my Instagram, which is Fandom Drums, and my TikTok, which is Absolute Fandom Trash, if you want like pictures. And I do have pictures of everything if you're like, what does this book look like? So yes, opening the floor to y'all. There's a mic there for any questions you might have about Marvel, Norse mythology, stuff. You're like, well, what about this myth? What about that one? My Instagram is Fandom Drums. And the profile picture is Keanu Reeves. Hello, question.
Yeah, in true Norse mythology, aren't the majority of the ones who kill the gods are actually either Loki's kids or grandkids? Not Fenrir's grandkids, and then the world's living ones is grandkids.
No. It's his nephews, because remember, Loki and Odin are brothers in real Norse mythology. So it would, yeah, that's also kind of what really freaks me out about Hel, or Hela, being Odin's child, because we know that Loki can time travel, and we also, through the his show, and then we also know that Loki can, you know, use a uterus to give birth, and it's just like, it's so bad. It's very bad.
There's the split second of like, I'm sorry, whose daughter?
Yeah, it was just because, you know, I was watching and I know who Hel is, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I have another daughter, and then it's Hel, and I'm like, excuse me, your niece is your daughter? I do not like this.
And again, Norse mythology has some weird stuff, but that's pushing it.
Marvel just
pushing it. Yeah. And again, that is a thing from the comics, so it wouldn't be a Norse mythology adaptation, it is a comic adaptation.
Yeah, and it's just, it's a weird thing. Also, she's like an executioner or something, and it's like, dude, she literally just watched over the realm, and then, yeah, she's like, I'm gonna murder everybody, conquistador style, like, woohoo, let's go genocide. And it's like, no, Hel is literally, you know, she got banished to Niflheim and has a castle and stays there for eternity. That is the only thing she does with her life.
If nobody else has any questions, I think Cal and I should say our favorite Norse myths, because I have been annoying everybody in my family about being excited about telling my favorite Norse myth. But Cal, tell your Norse myth first.
You can go.
My favorite Norse myth is the one where Loki gets headbutted in the balls by a goat.
You need to give more context.
Yes, goat, there's a goat. Okay, so after one of the adventures where Jotun dies, the daughter of one of them goes, hey, you guys murdered my dad. I would like compensation, please. And they're like, sure. And they're like, you're rich and stuff, so you can't give you monetary compensation? You want a husband? And she goes, sure. But you guys have to make me laugh at some point for it, because I'm not in a laughing mood. Cheer me up, my dad died. And they go, okay, so you give a stipulation, we give a stipulation. You can only pick a guy by his feet. And she had a huge crush on Balder, because Balder's hot and everybody loves him, and Balder's married, but everybody lines up and she picks Njord, who's the god of the ocean, which, you know, she's like, oh, I live on a mountain, this is not going to end well. But at the wedding, they're like, okay, we're going to try to make her laugh, and everybody is failing. And then Loki shows up with a goat from a stable, and yeah, he goes sailing across the room, lands in her lap, and she laughs. And it's actually interesting because it does not work out, because Scotty is the woman's name, and Njord, they try living in each other's houses, but they hate it, because it's like, I hate the mountains, I want the more nice beaches, and it's like, I hate the more nice beaches, where's my skiing? And they actually do live separately and stay married, which is really cool. It's like, you don't see a lot of that. So Cal, what's your favorite Norse myth?
It's so hard, there's so many.
There's so many good ones.
I already told the one about Thor having to get married and killing his husband, which is very gruesome but also very funny.
Also, please make that an MCU short. Like, Chris Hemsworth would do it. Chris Hemsworth would do it.
We want to see him in a wedding dress.
Yeah, with the veil. But also the funny thing about that thing is Thor is like being very aggressive. And so it's like, why is Freya staring at me? And Loki has to go, because she hasn't been sleeping well, Thor. Calm down. Yeah, she's so excited to marry you. And totally not because she hates you.
I mean, she is the goddess of war, so like her being hostile would also make sense.
Yeah, Thor was probably like, I'm doing a good Freya impression, give me my hammer.
I suppose there is there is the myth of how she ended up becoming the goddess who flies over the battlefields and whipping everybody up into like a stupor of like the full berserker Viking. Yeah, so, you know, the doors we were just talking about, she didn't get anything out of that, so she wanted a really pretty necklace. And they're like, you can have the most beautiful necklace in the world if you have sex with me. And she's just like, sure. And then Odin is an asshole and has a crush on her despite having a wife. And, you know, he can see everything. So he saw that and he's like, this makes me sad. And so Odin's just a horrible person and was like, you are now doomed to be the embodiment of, what was it? Was it greed? Or, I don't know, somehow it was greed? Yeah, and I don't know, it was like an embodiment of a certain emotion, and that emotion popped up a lot. So yeah, like if you were a Viking in battle, you might see a beautiful woman who is a Valkyrie and is about to take you to Valhalla, or you might see a beautiful woman who's about to like imbue you with pure berserker madness.
Another cool thing about that myth is like Odin's like, hey Loki, can you take the necklace? And Loki is always down for a prank, so he's like, hell yeah. And so he takes the necklace, and then Heimdall sees it and goes, not cool, buddy. And so then they have a massive seal fight. They just turn into seals and they have a fight. And Heimdall wins, and Loki is bitter about it forever.
Yeah, Loki can turn into whatever Loki wants. There's just like a seal,
a salmon,
a bird.
Salmon.
Yeah, it's just like a human.
Yeah, anything, really.
Loki can be whatever they want.
We stand. Repeat that?
How Zeus doesn't all.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Zeus doesn't. I mean, Odin does also have his fair share of transformations. Like, he turns into a snake, he turns into a falcon. He mostly disguises himself as, like, just a guy. He's like, no, I'm just a one-eyed guy with a hat, see?
Oh, yeah, what about the myth? You know it better than I, with the meat and the lady and the dog.
No, there wasn't any meat involved.
Oh, I thought that one had meat.
No, that was the meat of poetry. You're thinking about the meat of poetry, where he turned into a snake.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is probably like another myth, probably one of my other favorite myths, because Odin like saw a beautiful woman and like they're both married, but he's like, I don't care. Again, MCU Odin being a worse person than Myth Odin is saying something. At least Myth Odin is not a conquistador. But I mean he was, but like he didn't do genocide. Bar is low. Anyway, so Odin's like, hey, you wanna like meet up? And she goes, sure, meet me in this place. And so he goes, and there's just like a bed with a dog on it, and she totally like didn't show up, and he was like, I know I deserve it, but also why?
Yeah. Well, thinking about meat stuff, since Odin really does like it, there's not. Like there could be mead in Folkvanger, but in Valhalla there is a hole in the roof and a giant goat sleeps on the roof eating leaves off the tree of Yggdrasil, and then one of the udders is in the hole and it's just constantly producing mead into a giant cauldron so that everybody there is always mead for all of the fallen soldiers to drink.
Party in Valhalla all the time. When you aren't fighting and dying on the battlefield, you're partying.
Yeah, but like when you die in Valhalla, you just like pick up your head and stick it back on your body and you're like, woohoo, I'm whole again.
Oh, there is another question. Yes, hello.
What about the one with Loki and that horse?
We already covered Loki.
Oh yeah, that was at the beginning.
We made sure to cover that one.
Yes, because the child is in the movies.
Yes.
Yeah, the horse is. Well, yeah, that's the eight-legged one, but Svadilfari. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, yes. And that was the stallion that Loki distracted to make sure that they didn't have to give the sun, the moon, and Freya's hand in marriage, like, just to have Asgard built.
Yeah, up at the very top, that's the horse's name.
Yeah. Sleipnir.
Yes.
I named my horse in Zelda Sleipnir.
Nice. So I think if nobody else has any questions, we're going to go ahead and call it. Thank you all for coming.